This man held his daughter captive in a 100-square-foot pipe for 18 years. She couldn't even eat or drink. The only way they could communicate was through a window. Because his daughter was born with Steinberg's disease, she can't be exposed to the dirty air outside. The only way for her to breathe is to filter it through a purifier to remove the impurities. From the moment she was born, her father forbade her to leave the house. Even the view is through virtual VR glasses. The man thought her life would be a blur, but a 7.5 magnitude earthquake changed the family's fate. At that moment, the daughter in the purifier also sensed something was wrong. Through the glass, she saw a haze that swallowed up pedestrians on the road, and a huge amount of yellow smoke poured out of the cracked ground. Anyone who inhaled the smoke began to have trouble breathing and fell to the ground. Realizing the horror of the gas, the man hurriedly pulled his wife, who was standing by the window, and this action saved her life. The next moment, smoke began to enter the room through the cracks. The man told his daughter what was happening outside. He left his daughter, Anna, and took her to a higher floor. Anna's life is not in danger because she is protected by the medical cabin. In less than a second, the yellow smoke reached the 12th floor. Then the two of them started to climb up as fast as they could. It was only when they reached the highest floor that they knocked on the door of their neighbor's house. Before they could say hello, the men went to the balcony first. Seeing the smoke rising, he knew he couldn't just sit there and wait. Although the scenery in front of him was very beautiful, but the more beautiful it is, the more dangerous it is. But accidents always come at the most critical times. His daughter called for help through the walkie-talkie. The medical module's backup battery has only 4 cells left. If the poison doesn't dissipate, the pod will shut down. Both of them realize the gravity of the situation, but their daughter is on the 2nd floor, 18 floors away. A round trip plus the time to change the batteries would take one person to hold his breath for nearly 5 minutes. But at that moment, the man suddenly remembered that one of the neighbors downstairs had a serious respiratory problem, so there must be some spare oxygen cylinders there. For the sake of his daughter's safety, the man climbed down the pipe at the risk of death. When the poison flooded his body below the neck, he immediately held his breath. Using this short minute, the man quickly arrived at the target floor. After breaking the window, he immediately entered the room, but a corpse in the room interrupted his search. He turned the body over and found that it was his neighbor who had been sick. But before he could bow his head in mourning, the man felt he was reaching his limit. But after searching for a long time, he couldn't find an oxygen tank. He begins to panic and rushes to another room to look for it. The man can feel his life counting down. 20 seconds to go. That's the longest he can hold on. Fortunately, Lady Luck didn't abandon him. When he was about to suffocate, he finally saw a large oxygen tank in the corner. With his trembling right hand, he unscrewed the valve. Then he finally breathed in the oxygen. The man breathed with all his strength. After inhaling a large amount of oxygen into his lungs, he gradually regained his original peak condition. With this equipment, the man could move around freely. Then he went to the 2nd floor and replaced the spare batteries in the medical bay. But the bigger crisis was yet to come, as the poison continues to rise. Even though the couple is on the highest floor, for them, death is only a matter of time. He knew that once a large amount of this aversion was inhaled, it would kill him instantly. But this also strengthened the man's determination to go onward. As the poison slowly rose, the man felt more and more in danger. He broke away from his comfort zone above with the few remaining oxygen tanks he had left. He quickly walked down from the 28th floor, but just as he arrived downstairs, the man was horrified by the horrible scene in front of him. 100 corpses lay motionless on the ground. All of them were foaming at the mouth and had gone to heaven. The man knew that these people had died from inhaling the haze. His right hand subconsciously reached for the mask over his mouth. Feeling the safety of the oxygen tank behind him, his trembling heart slowly calmed down. However, every time he took a step, he had to watch his feet carefully. He was afraid that he might step on the bodies on the ground. Until the rescue team appeared, the man realized that he was finally saved. But he learned from them that the city had been completely destroyed by the smoke. The government has ordered the city to be sealed off. Everyone must leave the city as soon as possible. Seeing the man's rudimentary oxygen tank, the rescue team immediately replaced it with a brand new one. Then they asked him to follow the team, but the man hesitated for a while and then refused the team's offer. Because his family was waiting for him upstairs, the team would not stay with the man. But before leaving, the team gave him a set of life-saving oxygen equipment. When the man returned to the 28th floor, he senses that the haze is rising as fast as the eye can see. This also means the couple can't stay here. Now with 2 sets of oxygen cylinders, they can leave anytime they want, but their next-door neighbor and their daughter in the medical bay on the 2nd floor are a liability. So the men decide to head downtown to the lab for help. Before leaving, they came to the 2nd floor to say goodbye to their daughter. But when they found out what their parents were up to, she gave them another problem: to visit a friend who suffers from the same disease as her. But with little oxygen left, the man refused his daughter's request.
Maman, si c'était l'inverse, t'aimerais pas que ses parents le fassent pour moi?
The daughter's question made the parents hesitant. They had no choice but to agree. With the help of the oxygen tanks, they soon arrived at the laboratory. They found a few sets of equipment and the protective clothing their daughter needed. After that, the two of them quickly left the premises. Then they went to the boy's house according to the address given by the daughter. But just as they started to look for the presence of anyone, an accident occurred. There was an explosion of some kind, but the horrible aftermath still knocked the man unconscious. When he woke up again, he realized that the sensation of his breathing had suddenly become abnormal. He struggled to remove the mask from his face. It turned out that the oxygen tank's wiring had been blown off. He could only remove the mask first. Then he held his breath and stayed in a state of not being able to breathe. Along the way, the husband and wife could only share one oxygen tank. Finally, when they couldn't hold on any longer, they dragged several dozen pounds of equipment to the top floor of the building. But to their despair, even the remaining oxygen bottles are about to run out. Now only one of them can make it back. The husband, as a man, decided to give his wife the chance to survive. Although he was reluctant to give up, He thought that his daughter was still in danger and she could only take the case with her and leave, in order to save the little oxygen she had. She started to run fast, but the more she ran, the more she breathed. By the time she arrived at the bottom of the building, the oxygen in her tank had finally run out. Looking at the door of her home, she held her breath, then she immediately took off her belongings. She dragged her suitcase through the floors with great difficulty. Eventually, she managed to make it to the upper floors through her own perseverance. However, the moment she opened the box of equipment, she saw the damaged protective clothing. After all this work and risking her husband's life, all she got was a pile of rags. This scene brought the wife to the brink of collapse, but then the ringing of her cell phone woke her up. The cell phone indicated that her daughter's medical bay was low on battery power. With her husband gone, she was at a loss, but she couldn't stand by and watch her daughter die. So the wife decided to go back to save her daughter. After arriving at the stairway, she started to breathe greedily. Then she held her breath and rushed down without hesitation. She didn't dare to wait a second. She came to the second floor, seeing her mother without an oxygen mask. Her daughter was also very anxious, but she didn't have time to explain. She could only change the backup battery as fast as she could. When the machine was running again, she looked at her daughter fondly and said, "Goodbye," for the last time. Unfortunately, his wife collapsed on the ground on the way back. David, who was still unaware of the situation, was also in danger. The man looked in horror at the red liquid on the floor. Following the traces, he found a police officer who had been brutally murdered by someone else. The expression on his face was instantly replaced by horror. In order to get to the bottom of it, he began to tentatively walk towards the garage in front of him. As the man went deeper, he found a pile of supplies here. He saw an intact oxygen kit on the floor as well. After making sure no strangers were around, he grabbed the oxygen tank and quickly carried it on his back. But as he was about to go back in, a man in a police uniform walked in. He warned David to put his things down. The moment he saw the other man, the man knew where the body at the door had come from. "I'm afraid that even the oxygen tanks were taken from someone else." So he quietly opened the valve behind him first. Seeing the man's cover, the policeman was ready to pull out his pistol, but the man, who had been prepared, immediately put on his mask. He quickly rushed towards the police. Although the police officer had the upper hand in the struggle, but as he inhaled more and more haze, he gradually lost his strength. Although he solved the enemy in front of him, the man wasn't happy to have survived. He didn't stay here too long, and after calming his heart, he rushed back towards his home. Not long after, the man returned, but the scene in front of him was unbelievable. He saw a corpse lying motionless on the stairway. As he slowly approached, he realized that it was his wife. At this moment, the man finally broke down. The daughter on the second floor heard her father's voice. She rushed to ask what happened through the intercom, but the man's words just reached the edge of his mouth. But how cannot be said? The father's choking sobs made the girl realize what had happened, and for the first time, she felt as if she'd been born in the wrong place. But before she had time to feel sad, the culprit that triggered the poison descended again. As the earthquake grows stronger, the haze below is rising at a rate visible to the naked eye. Now even the 28th floor of the building is filled with smog. So the man decides to go out and get some more oxygen gear. But the neighbor thinks he's getting old and there's no point in wasting resources for the two of them. Seeing that their minds were made up, the man didn't force them any further. In the end, the man was lucky enough to find a protective suit for his daughter in an overturned truck. But on his way back, due to poor visibility, the man collided with another surviving human. The injuries caused by the accident, combined with the high stress of the past few days, the man no longer had the strength to stand up. However, just as he was leaning against the car, waiting to die, he saw two silhouettes coming out of the haze. The figures were his daughter and his friend, who had no protection. The man watched in disbelief. It turns out that people with Steinberg's disease are automatically immune to this type of gas. Then, to his daughter's shocked eyes, the man removed the oxygen mask from his face. He began to approach his daughter's cheek. This is the first time in 18 years that the man has actually touched his daughter. When the unconscious man woke up again, he found himself inside the medical bay. The outside environment is no longer suitable for him.
Oui, papa, j'arrive.